Hello everyone and welcome back to another layout update. This layout update will be for December of 2021 and this will be the final video to close the year off. In this layout update we're just going to cover some of the general progress that's been made over the last couple months anyway since the last layout update. See what's new, what I've been kind of up to, and see what we have in store for 2022. Without further ado, let's get started. So we'll start off over at the engine terminal on the lower level yard, and the reason we're looking at this area of the layout is not because I've made any progress on it or changed any track work. However, over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks in and around there, I've been working really hard at speed matching all of my locomotives and getting everything squared away so that I don't have any issues with running across the layout. Before I did some speed matching and for the most part they lined up, but there was a lot of locomotives that were a little bit different and causing some various issues when one was pulling too hard or vice versa. So I took everything off the layout again and I speed matched everything to one locomotive as a reference point, and I'm happy to say that I can basically mix and match anything on this layout now, and they'll all run relatively flawlessly. There's still a couple that are a little quick, but nothing major to cause any sort of issues so far. So happy that I finally got that squared away. So flipping around to the other side of the yard here, you'll notice that I've made some progress on this section. Now in previous layout updates, this was my repair shop, repair and place tracks where rail cars would be set off, both hypothetically and literally, if they were experiencing issues such as broken couplers or whatnot. And I would often just set off cars there, place cars there to remind myself that they needed to be fixed. However, I've since changed my idea on what I want to do with this area, and I have changed it to the heritage shops. So I did a couple things to achieve that. One is I added an additional, or I actually extended these two tracks which originally ran to the shop. So now it fits a full set of passenger cars, and parked in there currently is my Canadian Pacific script Canadian set, as well as the F units up here. So those two tracks store the passenger cars or the heritage sets. Meanwhile, the shop tracks will be up here. So eventually I'd like to get a steam engine, the Royal Hudson more than likely, which will end up in the shops here, and this will be my excursion train that will run across the layout every now and again. So I still have one more track that I plan on adding off the turntable, which will complete this area as the heritage shops, and then I just got to build the actual structures themselves. And while on the topic of the turntable, that's another thing that I had worked on. Actually, my buddy Luke has worked on over the last month or so, and we've been able to get that running nice and smoothly now. Before we installed it, it was causing some issues with some shorts. It was shorting out the layout when locomotives were on it, and I think that was because it wasn't a DCC friendly version. I believe it was an older version. So as you notice here, there's a hole in the fascia. That's where the old control panel was previously. We are no longer using the control panel. Instead, the turntable is hooked up to the track power, and it has a decoder wired into it, and what that allows us to do is allows us to control it directly from our throttle. So we gave it the address of 01 because to my knowledge there's no such locomotive that will ever use that, and then we use the toggle and the throttle knob to control it. So we can change the direction, we can change the speed a little bit, although it doesn't run very fast in general. And yeah, so it's running a lot better. It's operational now. It's still got a little bit of tweaking to do because it is an older kit, so we got a few little things to sort out there, but at the very least it's operational and it achieves what we want it to. Now, with that area becoming the heritage shops, some of you may be wondering where the repair and place tracks will be for the rail cars. Originally, this area here was going to be a mainline industry that was served by a local. I've since changed that idea in order to accommodate the repair and place tracks. As you can see in the back here, this is the structure that I was using for the repair shop, where the new heritage facility is. And I've decided to move the repair tracks here. So I have a little bit more work to do. I got to add in another switch and take a track into one of the second bays there. And then that will be complete, and that'll be the new location for the repair tracks. So another area of the layout I've invested a lot of time in over the last month is the command post here, where my command station and boosters are. For those of you who follow my Instagram page, and if you don't, I'll put the link in the description. Those of you who follow my Instagram page, you know that earlier in November, my layout or my command post suffered a major failure. And after 8 hours of troubleshooting, I was able to confidently identify that the PM42 boards from Digitrax, which are the power district management boards for the layout. For those of you who don't know, this layout is subdivided into 8 different districts that are 4 for the upper, 4 for the lower, that isolate each section so that the layout runs a little bit smoother. Anyway, both of my boards somehow had crapped out completely. I don't know exactly what happened. However, I suspect it was some kind of short or power surge that caused the issue. So I had to send them back to Digitrax for repair. While they were out for repair, I started kind of finalizing the wiring a little bit here, and just overall just beefed up the system entirely. I bought a Digitrax PS 2012E, which is the power supply, which supplies power to my DCS 240, which is the command station and booster for the lower level, which is wired to the first PM42 board. And then the other half of the power supply goes to the DB150 here, and it is a booster for the upper level. So the DCS 240 provides the digital command for the entire layout, but only powers the lower level. So overall, I've had a lot more success with the layout, and overall just more smooth operations now that I have the booster in for the upper level and a nice beefy power supply here. So happy to finally have that all squared away. It's been kind of temporarily installed since I got the layout up and running. So now that all that has been sorted out, hopefully I won't have any more issues and we'll never have to touch it again, but we'll knock on wood for that. And lastly, we're over here on the branch line and grade to the upper level. Not much progress has been made since the last layout update in terms of rock carvings and molds. I think maybe I got this section completed. However, I still have a ways to go. This project kind of took a back burner, especially when I had all those issues with the command station, and I got sidetracked by a couple other projects, and that tends to happen. I just kind of got bored of carving rocks because it's a pretty monotonous task when you're doing it for hours on end. So I hope to pick up the rest of this early on in the new year so I can get this portion scenicked. However, there have been some major changes on the branch line, which I'll show you now. In fact, let me rephrase that. There's been some major changes underneath the branch line. For those of you who have been following for more than a year, I have been talking about the staging underneath the branch line. I'm happy to say after many, many months of procrastination, I have finally completed that project. And that's added a whole new dynamic to the operations across the layout. I'm going to take the camera off the tripod here and just give you a quick run by. There's not a whole lot to it, but I'll show you kind of what went into the construction, and take a closer look here. So the staging operation starts here. The switch comes off the main line, and originally it just came straight down the branch line and down to the industries. However, I added a switch in the back here, which peels off and immediately starts a pretty strict descent down to the staging. I didn't anticipate on having any grades this steep on the layout. However, because staging was an afterthought, I had to take into account the pre-existing framework and supports, which meant that I had to make the initial part of the grade quite a bit steeper than the rest of it, just so I could clear the supports once it came past this point. So once it passes this point here, the grade actually levels out a little bit. It becomes less steep, and you can see it's just a basic plywood and support framework for this. Nothing special. The only other thing I have to do is staple up some cardboard to prevent any cars from hitting the floor if they derail. And then that brings us down to the actual staging yard, at which point it levels out. Now the interesting thing about the staging yard is I only have 4 tracks. That said, I can still store 4 tracks worth of cars while keeping the runaround track open, so I can run around the train and pull a new set of cars out. And how I accomplished this was, because I couldn't put a 4th track in the back because I was running into clearance issues with those angled supports, is I extended a lead off of the other end of the yard. So it extended basically the remaining length of the branch line. So where the track ends down there is where this lead on the staging ends. And when an inbound train comes to the staging yard, it simply chooses the next set of cars that it's going to be taking to the upper level, and it pushes that set of cars all the way down the lead and drops the inbound set of cars in the track that it's pushing the cars out of. And that just makes operations a lot quicker, because you've essentially already ran around the train that you are going to take back up. And quite frankly, this isn't really an operational friendly area. It's quite low to the ground. So the less work, the better for the operator, essentially. This is just an extra place to store cars and get cars in and out of rotation on and off the layout. So when the train is ready to depart, it pulls the set of cars that push down the lead, down the runaround, and it starts up the grade again. So that's just a quick rundown of the staging operation. I apologize for the quick movements, as the camera isn't on the tripod, but like I said, it's quite low to the ground and hard to work around. Another thing I forgot to mention when I was on the topic of speed matching is I have successfully completed a complete conversion to ESU loc sound decoders in all of my locomotives on this layout. Before, I had a lot of Athearn Genesis and Intermountain products that were using Soundtrack Tsunami, and while there isn't anything wrong with the Soundtrack's decoders, I've just found that I enjoy the customization and the different capabilities of ESU decoders combined with the loc programmer. And I also just wanted consistency across all of my locomotives, just for smoother operations in general. I've just found that when they're all on the same page, it has just worked better for me. And as a result, I've got all of my locomotives with sound, speaker upgrades, LEDs, etc., etc. So I'm super stoked about that. It was quite a long process. Obviously, decoders are not cheap. However, just picking away at them a little bit at a time, and they were done before I knew it. So very happy with that. As you probably noticed in the opening clips of this video, I picked up some new locomotive power, and what you're looking at here is the brand new Athearn Genesis -9 44 CWL. For those of you who are not familiar with the -9 series, the CWL is the Canadianized version of the -9, which comes with a wider cab and 4-window variation. Now, this is extremely special to us Canadian modelers, because prior to Athearn releasing these, the only way you could get your hands on them, as for many other models, was by buying an overland brass model, which costs a lot of money, to say the least. So when these were announced, I went a little bit crazy and bought up a bunch of them. What you're looking at here is 4644, and this is the first BC Rail version to hit the layout. And before it even hit the layout, it was sent off to Rob Arsenault from weathermytrains.com, and he's just done a phenomenal job on this locomotive. He weathered it 2 prototype images from, I believe it was 2020, so fairly recently. He added the Scotch-Lite reflective tape along the sill there and just weathered it phenomenally. I'm thoroughly impressed with the work that he's done. And then in behind it is another Dash 9 44 CWL. This is the CN version of this locomotive, and it too received a weathering job from Rob Arsenault. He just does phenomenal work. There's just no two ways about it. Just taking a look at this locomotive here, you can see the cab fading there, as well as you can't see it from this angle, but there's some cab fading on the red there along the upper nose. And 2500 again is weathered to prototype photos. It hasn't. It's not as heavily weathered as some of the other 2500 series. It's very common for these 2500 series to have a very light pink, heavily faded, heavily chipped cab because they are fairly old locomotives. However, 2500 on the prototype isn't that bad off in terms of the paint. A little extra here, which I think is the highlight of this locomotive that Rob added, was the burn and scorch marks along the long hood. I just think the unit looks awesome. I'm super impressed with Athearn's job on these locomotives. They look fantastic. The detail's great. I had no problems out of the box, with the exception of the walkways. On the Canadian versions, they're see-through walkways, and the reason for that is on the prototype, the snow pack will drop through them. However, because of that, there's very little surface area where they can glue it, and I just imagine during shipping some of them with the etched metal just popped up. It's not a difficult fix by any means. I had them all squared away, looking good as new within 5 minutes. So, in addition to that, Athearn did an awesome job on these, and Rob also did an awesome job weathering these to make them look just like the prototype. And as I said, I did go a little overboard with these locomotives when they were first announced. So I have a few more here. Let's zoom out. First up, I have BC Rail 4642. As well as BC Rail 4641. And Canadian National 2520. All of these are in the box still. I don't plan on putting them on the layout right away, just because I would like to send them to Rob, and especially with that weathered pair, they would look a little bit off-putting running around the layout. Another thing that I did to all of these units right off the bat is I installed Loc Sound and a dual Shure Cube speaker inside of them, and they sound phenomenal. So there's just a quick little preview of the sound file that ESU provided for these locomotives. The horns sound great. BC Rail had a pretty specific horn variation by comparison to the rest of the railroads, and I think they've done a very good job on that. The CN version sounds great as well, and overall I'm just absolutely floored by these locomotives and super thrilled that they've been produced in plastic. Ask anybody even a year ago, 2 years ago, before these were announced, they would have looked at you like you're crazy, saying that these would be produced in plastic. So overall, couldn't be happier with these purchases, even though I probably got a few too many for how often I'm going to operate them, but I just don't have enough good things to say about them. Before I conclude this video, I'll just briefly run over some of the projects for 2022. The first being the upper level staging, which will be in the same room as the helix on the other side of that wall. I'm working already on gathering supplies to accomplish that. I got a little bit of work to do in that room in order to accommodate the staging yard, which is going to be a reverse loop, and it too will be around probably 5-6 tracks, with one being kind of just a run-around reverse loop rather than storage. And lastly, for 2022, I am going to work on completing the scenery for the mountain grade as well as the branch line. Those are two fairly large projects. So obviously the grade, I have scenery well underway in terms of the major construction of it all. Next will be paint and various different texturing and static grass, etc. However, the branch line will require a little bit more work in terms of structures, and the street running scene will be also quite an undertaking as well. So those are three major projects that I have planned for 2022, and I'm looking forward to completing them. And with all of that said, that concludes the December 2021 layout update. Thank you for tuning into the channel, and I hope you enjoyed this layout update. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy the video, give it a thumbs down. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. I'm always welcoming of new subscribers, and I hope you enjoy my content. I'll be signing off for now, but I'll see you very shortly in the new year here as 2021 draws to a close. So once again, I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and an even better New Year, and we'll see you soon right here on my channel.